So VidCon's going on right now. Live YouTubers like Philip DiFranco. Live YouTubers? He's not a live YouTuber. Okay, why do I title my video Philip DiFranco Sucks? VidCon 2017. Well, he doesn't suck because his content is particularly bad or he's a bad person. He sucks because he has massive support when he's doing shit. So he was describing his editing process, and he sends his content to his editors, and then they chop it up and then get it online. Okay, he has a great editing team. Let me first of all say, Joey does the live vlog. I think he does a great job, and then he has, I believe it, someone else does some other editing, and they add special effects, and it's timely, it's well conceived, well composed, appropriate music, good transitions. You know, if you want to know what a good vlog looks like, you know, him and Casey Neistat are top of the game for the most part. It's pretty amazing that they can put these content out. That really, they know how to do the quirky. So this is what we call a great YouTuber. So, but a lot of things happen at VidCon, and it's always interesting to see what he will and won't cover. He's kind of the mainstream YouTuber that's not mainstream, meaning he's creating that new content, challenging, a direct challenge of mainstream media. And so he puts himself in a specific position that he's super careful with what he says. So things are emerging at VidCon that he's not commenting on. And he doesn't suck because he's not commenting on that, is that we want to wait and see what he does. He sucks because he has all these creators behind him. He has a team of now 4, I believe, full-time researchers. So they have time to dissect bills, they have time to go over material. So this is going to be very interesting to observe his content and where his content goes with the actual researchers in terms of getting a more accurate picture of events. Probably what news agencies should do in terms of analyzing content. So we're seeing a new transition in media, which is amazing. But this is an evolution of the news media. Now we're also learning at VidCon the concept of trolling, and we have emergent characters. You know, we're seeing who's going to become the new media. New media isn't going to be new for very long. It's going to be the media, and whatever was old media will either have to incorporate the principles of new media or vanish. The responsiveness to people, the honesty, integrity, people are going to be more challenging the integrity of new media. We've seen the mistakes made by the Wall Street Journal in terms of their attack of PewDiePie. We see this inability to be mistaken. So one of the failures of any a narrative is that if you can't go off script, if you can't make mistakes. So what made me do this video was Philip DiFranco and all that background, you know, news content analysts that he can do, and editors that he can do in terms of content. So it sucks that we all can't have that kind of background, that you have to work for it to create a foundation of good media. So, you know, and I think he is, and the only reason I use him as a title was because he sucks for new media, or old media. You know, he's going to cause problems for them, and he's someone you want to watch, and he's going to be the platform. And I think David Rubin is going to be doing the same thing. These are the emergence of new platforms, new media, where you don't have a a personality behind the scenes. The person you see is the person that's responsible for what you see, which is unusual in media circles. So think about the Wall Street Journal. They have quote unquote reporters that report on media, but they're not actually accountable for the content. The actual magazine itself is accountable, and as a personal entity beyond the actual reporting. So in the Wall Street Journal example, where they took on PewDiePie, the Wall Street Journal actually said, no, we stand behind the reporters. The only point I'm making here is that the new media is more responsive to the content they're creating, and they're giving themselves the freedom to make mistakes, which is really the key transition that we need to make in media, is the ability to make mistakes, which gets me to trolling and what's happening now at trolling at VidCon. So if you probably have heard, Sargon was attacked by Anita Sarkeesian verbally, so I think he can handle it, but that she was calling him garbage. And as individuals, we need to understand what trolling is and how trolling works. It's an emotional thing, right? How do you deal when your detractors is there in front of you? How do you handle that when you've dehumanized that person, actually see them there as a human being, and then feeling this impulse to, as a human being, you said a garbage human being. Why is it so important to you that you can degrade someone to that level? Can you not see people as human beings, and that they have opinions you may disagree with? And it's perfectly reasonable to disagree with people. And this isn't something that we're tolerating, is this ability to disagree with people. And that is the thing that we have to emphasize, is we have to learn to be able to disagree, learn to criticize, and be critical of ourselves as well as critical of others. And this is classic Anita Sarkeesian. You know, it is so amazing that she couldn't handle having her detractors. But no, what the funny comment that I think was made, that I saw in one of these videos, was, in many ways, her detractors accounted for maybe a third of the audience that went to that panel. They were there, they wanted to actually have an opportunity to actually ask questions of her. Because she, every single time that she will avoid direct conversations that people actually are knowledgeable about her subject. Very few people are knowledgeable about, you know, the feminist frequency, and actually have analyzed what she's saying and actually have thought about it critically. So this is a peer review. You had a peer review audience in front of you, and you couldn't handle it. So, you know, on a dissertation, the people in the audience aren't going to be there, your friends. They're going to be there asking hard questions, and so you need to be able to defend yourself. So in the same sense of peer review, this was a peer review audience. And that's the problem with feminism. That's the problem with the social justice warrior stance, is they don't want peer review. Christina Hoff Sommers, if you don't know who she is, you should know, couldn't engage in a peer review conversation because they don't want criticism. They don't want analysts of what they're doing. Now, is this... Okay, I won't do it right now, but I noticed the button. I'll try it some other time. So that sort of, those things going on VidCon, I'm not there, so I have to do something to say, yeah, I'm paying attention, I'm watching. There was also, Dave Rubin did from his studio, he did a really great interview with, I can't pronounce his name, but check it out if you're on Patreon. I don't know if it's a Patreon only, but it's a really good interview, and really talks about making mistakes, you know, and being allowing for mistakes from the understanding the Muslim perspective, or how to think about that. And as people want to learn more and want to learn how to think about that, I think there's some great people out there that are really thinking hard about the problems, and they're evolving and changing and trying to encourage other people to involve in change. On that note, evolving and changing Laci Green is a huge meme factor. And it's been an amazing transition to watch how people now look at Laci Green. Notice my green screen, that's in tribute to Laci Green. No, just kidding. But she, she has a recent video, and feminists, again, attacking her with non-critical. Kevin Logan attacked her, and Noel Plum goes after her and protects her. But there's a lot of pressure from all sides, and then she gets a song written about her by, it was a really nice song, I really like the song, her and Chris Reagan. I'm like, what kind of pressure are people under, when they do make transition? But it's a love song for Chris Reagan and Laci Green. I really thought it was a great, the Buddha, I should have these things written down, but I never know where I'm going to go, so I don't know what I'll need for notes. But it's a great song. If you haven't heard it, go out there, and I'll link to the low bar once I get this video up, and hopefully I'll remember. If I don't, comment, where's that link you promised me? But there's a huge difference. So you have this social justice warrior writing love songs to Laci Green at this point, and then you have people like Kevin Logan calling her a non-feminist because she doesn't toe his idea of what the feminist line is. And to tie this back into Anita, Anita goes, who's your favorite feminist, and names some feminist I've never heard of. Where once upon a time she might have pointed to Laci Green, because Laci Green has been a major force in the feminist community. And the fact that she actually wants to nail down feminist ideology and actually have peer review, but what I think she's going to realize is these ideas that she has assumed are peer-reviewed haven't been peer-reviewed. And this is where Christina Hoff Sommers comes in. Again, if you don't know her, please, I will link to her if I remember. But the thing is, Laci Green is off reservation, so she's been added to the Twitter block. Oh my goodness. Block all feminists. Laci Green is no longer a feminist according to that filter. And that's pretty funny, right? So here she is, having a conversation, wants to have a conversation, a peer-reviewed conversation. But this is what Christina Hoff Sommers found out when she was trying to peer review some of the research that was being parroted, like the minimum, or the pay gap, the what was the other thing that she, oppression, how women are being more oppressed, how women are more now here's an interesting one, and this is sort of off the cuff. Now, Christina Hoff Sommers wrote this in her book Who Stole Feminism, but one of the studies that was being cited in Miss Magazine was that women, girls, when they reached the age of like 12 or 13, were more depressed than boys. What that really is indicating, and it wasn't talked about in the Ms. Magazine, was it's indicating that women are more realistic at a younger age than our boys, which makes sense. I mean, you could almost argue boys do mature younger. No, older than girls. So girls are maturing at a younger age than boys. Now, for all kinds of reasons, this is true. But that to even attack that issue would be to get them in trouble. They're to make that statement. So the new media can't handle, the old media can't handle these transitions in narrative. They're not able to adjust to, maybe our narrative is wrong. And this is something we should all be kind of aware of. Okay, what are the criticisms of my perspective on a specific issue? And when you look at the we'll call it the Muslim issue or the jihadist issue or the Islamist issue. You know, when looking at that issue, you have to hear all voices and help correct ourselves as well as other people. When you say, well, I wouldn't say it just like that because I'm afraid of this effect on that particular person. So being honest to people and not being afraid of being wrong is really an important aspect of free speech, and that's why free speech we protect kind of absolutely, because we want people to be able to express themselves as candidly as possible. And I had an answer to a question that was asked of Anita, and this is what you can look to when someone is asked a potentially difficult question. The question I thought was particularly funny was, do you believe in everything that you've produced in the last so many years that you've done? And her response to that was simply, what a stupid question. Well, is it a stupid question? Have you evolved? I mean, there's so many different ways you could have answered that question. Both, you know, a simple answer would be, of course, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't believe it. She's done with the question. She doesn't have to call it stupid. She doesn't have to call it out. There's plenty of ways of handling questions that can be totally in left field, but you can bring them in and you can pass them off if you want to. And not the fact that she can't do that means that she doesn't have good coaches that are explaining how you handle controversial questions without answering them. That's what politicians learn quite well, is how to answer non-answer, right? I mean, that's just basic 101, speaking to the public. But she's been so isolated from the real public that her primary people that would talk to her, you know, is so filtered. She lives in a filtered bubble, not just a, you know, bubble, but no one's allowed into the bubble, you know, and it's a contracting bubble as Laci Green gets ejected and as other people start getting ejected from the bubble. Now you look on the anti-feminist side, and this is growing and growing and growing. So you can't help but eventually be on a very marginalized bubble. And that's what people are doing, is they're putting themselves in a more marginalized bubble. And I think VidCon can't help. Their voices are going to become less and less. And it's important that YouTubers go to these events and be present, but be extremely courteous and kind and listen to the detractors. Listen to your detractors. If you're detractors, listen to them. Learn how to speak with them. You don't have to agree with them, but knowing how to, where their points are, and to say, well, then we disagree on this point. I mean, it's my evolution on racism has radically changed. I don't believe in color categories. I fundamentally think black culture is a horrible idea. So white culture is also a horrible idea. So I'm not a white nationalist, nor would I support white nationalism, me personally. Now, I would let you argue that point, and I would hear it, but that's my perspective. And I'm not afraid to talk to a white nationalist. I'm not afraid to talk to a person with a different perspective, because I feel I understand my perspective well enough that I can defend it. And that's what we should be teaching. And we will teach this. There are more and more people will be doing more and more of these things. I'm going to push that just because I can. Ooh, that was a little weird one. That's not so bad. See, they have filters in this YouTube thing that I didn't know was there before. There's that filter, which I kind of like that filter. Who's going to vote that up? Are you going to send me down, down, down? Okay, I said I wasn't going to play with the filters, but I went ahead and played with the filters. That's a little less distracting with the black and since we're talking about race, you know, I should be black and white, right? You know, you don't want to talk race without, you know, making sure you have the right color combinations. So yeah, I've been thinking about VidCon. You never know how many people you'll get on these live streams, but I wanted to kind of do a live stream again. Haven't done one in a while. Not one where I was just speaking to the camera. It's too bad there's not more people, so we get some conversations. But yeah, Phil kind of gave me a kick in the ass because he did his live stream. It's like, what a bastard. How can he get so many people helping him? No, I don't. It's interesting. Once someone said something about the Amazing Atheist, and the Amazing Atheist is something sort of odd. You know, if you want to have an odd perspective on the world, you know, watch one of his videos. But it's kind of interesting to see where he's coming from. But one of the things he said was, I hate people that are more successful than me, right? Now, somebody's more successful than you and you hate them, that's really kind of silliness, right? But he's kind of a silly person. But anyways, even listening to him, you can easily disagree with some things he says. Sometimes he's really ill-informed. And I think we could attribute a lot of that to his own personal laziness. But, so looking at people in terms of their perspective and understanding their strengths and weaknesses, you know, there are people that can have good strategic, logical arguments. And they're just good. Bam, bam, bam. I mean, Nawaz, the guy that Dave Rubin had on recently, is a very interesting character. And the reason he was really dynamic, and this is why I really am pimping his particular show today, because that is a conversation that I loved seeing because he was so dynamic this time. Sometimes I think he's very reserved when I hear him speaking, especially when he's doing the TV shows. And he was just on all cylinders today with Dave. And I don't know what Dave gave him to drink or what, but he was really on. And I really have to say that is the show to watch if you want to watch. I can't say his name. God, those Muslim people, then their stupid names. No, I'm kidding. But anyways, I hate the fact that I can't say his name. I can almost spell it in my head, but I can't say his name. Maajid. But anyways, the point is being able to hear someone and where they're coming from, even if you disagree, is so important in terms of understanding your own arguments and your own emotional attachments to those arguments. And it's really quite simple. And I see more and more people adopting this stance. And I see less and less people adopting the Anita Sarkeesian stance. Let's censor everything. Let's block everything. So another quote, if you want to know an interesting quote from Anita Sarkeesian in her statement, and it says, it's not like everyone can just get on the internet. She said something to that effect, okay, basically saying, we shouldn't just be allowed to get on the internet and say whatever you want. Why not? That would be an interesting conversation. Why shouldn't you be allowed to get on the internet and say just about anything you want? That's the quality of her thinking on some of these issues. And when we're thinking about where people stand, understand the horseshoe, and I think it's a valid, people may disagree with the horseshoe, but I think it is valid. On both extremes, we have authoritarians. So you can flip the horseshoe up and you can say, well, they're both authoritarian, but they're authoritarian for different reasons. And so when you're talking to someone and you say, well, how do you fix that problem? You know, I don't like garbage on the street. Well, what's the best way to fix that problem? Do we, as a government, mandate people pick up the garbage on the street? How do you want to solve that problem? Some states use prison labor to solve that problem. You know, I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to explain possible solutions to a problem. So if you don't like seeing something in society, if you'd like to see it differently, how would you change the structure of society in order to solve the problem you're seeing? And we may agree on that problem. I mean, I don't like garbage on the street, and I don't like to see people panhandling on the side of the street. But how do we address the question will be where we need to talk. So when you say to someone, you're racist or bigot, and don't even get into the actual conversation of how you solve the problem, then we can't really go anywhere until we can actually discuss the problem. So we're not discussing the problem. And Nawaz, which I can't say his name, he's beyond just talking about a specific political ideology. He's about all ideologies, really, ultimately. And that's what's good about this conversation, is realize these conversations are interconnected. There are elements of the conversation, the authoritarian. Now, I've pointed out to people before that in a way you can think of grammar. When someone corrects your grammar, that's an authoritarian position, as if there is a book that tells you what the correct grammar is. Now you're going to say to me, well, there's a book. Originally, when dictionaries were designed, they weren't designed to be authoritative. They were designed to be informative, meaning this is how it's generally used, and maybe even give it an explanation as to why, in terms of a definition or whatever. For example, English is a very historical language, so there's a lot of historical reasons behind why words are spelt the way they are. So, in terms of communication, I think Mark Twain made a comment, you should know the rules before you break the rules. But that's basically understand someone else's perspective. Okay, I might understand the authoritarian's perspective on language, and I can say, I'm not going to obey that rule. I am not that concerned about that particular rule because I'm still achieving my goal of communication without obeying that rule. And I might even be more effective by bending or breaking that rule. So you can ask the question of anyone, why is it important? Why is us gender pronouns? Why is it important that we use gender pronouns with people? How is it going to help them? Or how is it going to hurt them? And the common knowledge in the anti-SJW, anti-feminism, or men's rights is that we recognize that by not allowing people to deal with their own crap, meaning the stuff that's put at them, the trolls that attack them, not teach them how to deal with them, we're making them vulnerable, we're making them incapable of having their own agency. So, can they deal with it? You're not helping them learn how to deal with it. And in the example, we can go right back to Anita Sarkeesian and say, now, Anita, you can't handle a left field question. Why not? Most public speakers, for any length of time, have to deal with left field questions in a graceful manner without drawing too much attention to them. Because by calling a question stupid, what you're doing is you're drawing attention to the question, more so than you probably want to give it. So you're saying, I don't want to give you attention, but by calling the question stupid, you're actually drawing people's attention to that question. And that's something that I would encourage anyone when they're commenting on videos. How much attention do you want to draw to your emotions, and how much attention do you want to draw to your ideas? So we may have an emotion, like I'll say, that's stupid. Okay, now comes the work part. Why is it stupid? What about that statement is stupid? So you know it's stupid. So now you have to decide, how can I illustrate this fact that is stupid without actually saying the word stupid? So identify the emotion and then figure out how you can express why it's stupid. But in that process, you might discover you have some wrong ideas. You're reacting to something maybe you shouldn't react to. So I use language as an example of authoritarianism because it's something we can all kind of identify with. But it's not the only form of authoritarianism. But it is authoritarian in the sense that the dictionary is we treat it as an authority on rightness. Okay, it doesn't necessarily need to be that way, but if we adhere to the rules of English as are written in a dictionary, more people will be able to understand what we're saying. So there's a fine line to being totally chaos and being totally authoritarian. there is a description, a descriptive part, and people that study language and the evolution of language understand, linguists understand that there's a history and flow. So you see new words emerging into the language. It's not a static form. So you take something, certain forms of feminism, try to be very static. You can't come up with new ideas. And in Chris Regon's video on the PC culture, it is sort of a disease of trying to minimize the language to a point that it's so sterile we can't actually communicate any ideas. We're just virtue signaling. It's a constant virtue signaling that we're doing. We're not really trying to develop new ideas and new ways of being better to each other. So we're not opposed. We're not opposed to the conversation. We're not opposed to discovering where we're wrong in our thinking. And this is a fundamental difference. Now, I can pick apart a Sargon video, and I have on occasion said, I don't think this is a good idea, I don't think that's a good idea. And I don't think he takes it wrong, and I don't think the commenters necessarily take it wrong. They may disagree with my perspective, but that evolution can occur because we allow it to occur, because we encourage it to occur. Now, my picking on Thunderfoot is that he's kind of in his own little bubble of denial, and I think that bubble of denial is caused through some emotional turmoil in his life. It's also caused because he doesn't value YouTube or social media in a positive way. He sees his work as work, and this is just fun. He does it for the lulz. And I think that's come back to bite him, to realize that we have evolved to, we've been developing a more sophisticated language. And as we have developed a more sophisticated language, people like Laci Green have been forced into the conversation because she realizes things aren't growing in the feminist community, but they are growing in the men's rights, in the anti-social, anti-feminist communities. These ideas are evolving and changing, and they can't just be negative. In fact, this is an interesting shout out I'll give to the Amazing Atheist, is he's recognized that you have to have a positive message, not just an anti-message. So being an anti-feminist isn't constructive. You need a positive message to project. If you don't have it, then you're not long-term relevant. So David Rubin, Tim Pool, the Tim Cast, they're working on a specific message. Now, they all have a different take on things, and I'll even say Philip DiFranco, are working with positive message in terms of getting the information out there, but then analyzing that in a perspective, and then creating a conversation, a starting point for the conversation. Well, how do we want to deal with this specific problem? Because at the end of the day, it's all about behavior. How do you want to affect behavior? How do you want to affect my behavior? How do you want me to affect your behavior? And that's what we're trying to do with this conversation. And there's an evolution occurring. Without a doubt, there is an evolution occurring. And it's not one person, it's a bunch of people. We're all evolving, not just one group, but all the groups. And it's interesting. So you see, on one hand, you see Laci Green come into a group, and you see Thunderfoot kind of fall out of a group. But he's not unwelcome. But it's, if you follow the VidCon situation and the comments that Dave, from aka Computing Forever, made about Thunderfoot, maybe you're welcome here. We would value your perspective. And that was good to see, that they recognize that he's kind of divorced himself from it. And it's probably, from a psychological, emotional standpoint, it's probably a good thing. And if you look at Thunderfoot's current videos, he's more focused on the scientific end, which is a less emotional. But the evolution that has occurred in the sphere, what some came in through atheistic channels, some came through just feminist, anti-feminist, or perhaps Muslim background. Something drew them into this, what I would call the liberal free speech movement, is the easiest way to describe it, and I wouldn't even call it the skeptic movement, which Thunderfoot, I think in a way, misdiagnosed the community that he was critical of. But that's neither here nor there, because most people within this particular community, and you can look at VidCon, and if you follow Sargon, you just look around him and the videos that he has and around then, and I can say that is the community I'm talking about, because you got the Honey Badgers there, you got Timcast there, you got Chris Reagan there, you got a whole host of people that would be the shit posters, the garbage of humanity there in the front row. So that is the ideology that Thunderfoot is uncomfortable with. Not all of these people are agreeing, and the important thing is they don't have to agree. You know, and they can still have conversations, constructive, they can challenge one another's ideas. And this is ultimately what you want in a conversation. So we have a contraction of one bubble. The feminist bubble is contracting, and people like Laci Green are popping out and realizing, hey, if you want to be critical, if you want to be serious, and you really want to do the work and actually have a difference on society, changing the behavior of people, you need to talk to people that actually care about the subject and are capable of being disagreed with. Being disagreed with. How does that sounds totally wrong. And this is fascinating and wonderful, and there's a whole beautiful sea of people that understand what each other say. Now, we have a lexicon now, and the lexicon is going to grow and change, and we don't know where it's going to go. That's the beautiful part. We don't know the kind of interesting events that can occur, and we can certainly see having a love song made about you, Laci Green. I don't know about the love song that was made about you, but that was pretty amazing. That is the type of reaction your detractors have towards you by the fact that you just simply, I want to talk to you. That's a pretty amazing transition. And I would like to thank the Loud Buddha for coming out and making that. But it's also very intimidating. Like, what do they expect me? Am I really red pill? Can I really be who I am? Do they expect me to become an anti-feminist? No. You're not welcomed into a community because you're going to simply agree with an anti-feminist position. You're welcomed in the community because you're willing to have a conversation. That's a pretty low bar to be welcomed into a community. If you're willing to have a conversation, if you believe in free speech, this community welcomes you in. How low of a standard do you need? But that is the low standard that's being set by this particular community. Basically, it has an open visa policy, what do you call open border policy in terms of coming into the community. We want more voices, not less voices. We want conversations. We want challenge of ideas. Now, I'm speaking for a community which doesn't know I exist, but that's perfectly fine, because that's a part of the beauty of the new voices that emerge and come into being and then maybe filter away, get into another aspect of life and living. But it's a pretty amazing thing to see as these structures are being created. I mean, I am thinking, you're looking at Philip DiFranco, and I'll make a prediction that he will become probably one of the most prominent figures in media, in news, in 5 or 10 years, I don't doubt that he will be a force to be reckoned with. And we hope that he remembers his roots and his balanced approach to news. Now, I think Tim Pool, I think, is also in a similar situation, but the problem with any new venture is you need to drum up the financial infrastructure, the roots of that kind of system. And the reality is, if you don't have the ability to travel on a shoestring budget, if you don't have the ability to sleep on couches, you don't have those types of functionality, it's going to be very hard for you to get into that business. But if you can do that and are willing to do that, then the model that Tim Pool is showing you is a doable model for most people, if they have those abilities, regardless of who they are. If you enjoy conversation, if you enjoy being honest, and you enjoy the grind, as he was pointing out at VidCon, going to a party is work. And I laughed and commented. Well, I think I commented. I'm not sure I submitted that comment, but it was funny that you're working when you're at VidCon. And it's true. I can totally understand. The whole thing is about networking. The whole thing is about getting contacts. The whole thing is getting the conversation, pushing the conversation along. How do we change the most egregious human behaviors? How do we migrate this huge media machine that isn't really sensitive to what's going on in the world, to making positive change? If it bleeds, it leads. That's a horrible model to run a business, but how do you get people to focus on the positive change that we can make? And the scary thing about YouTube and social media is you can't make statements without getting criticized. And this censoring social media, so, it's just social media, it's all just fake news, isn't going to work. And it's not going to work because it's too easy for us to network among ourselves. So your job, if you want to do something like what Tim Pool does, is to network with people and be able to compare and contrast different ideas. So you're not limited to one outlet of information. You have a whole host of outlets. And you have to understand where they're coming from, good or bad, right? Are they honest about what they're saying? Are they an honest conservative? Are they an honest liberal? Are they honest? If these are how they identify themselves, are they honest about it? Are they honest feminists? Are they intellectual? Understanding their strengths and weaknesses will help us determine who we can negotiate with and who will say, look, I'm sorry, I don't trust your where you're coming from right now, and this is why. Now, there needs to be a path of redemption, meaning if someone's made a mistake and they say, you know what, I've made mistakes, I'm asking you for forgiveness now, I understand what I did was wrong. We need to have a pathway that allows them to evolve, to change, to recognize where they have erred, if it's sincere. And this needs to be a normal part of the conversation. We all are going to make mistakes. We are emotional animals. We get caught up into our emotions and we forget all the things that can go horribly wrong. And we're vulnerable as humans. And that's the reason we're coming together, is to help protect our vulnerabilities. So in that sense, in terms of a social justice sense, their instinct to protect is noble. But how they're trying to protect people is by changing the outside world. It's like, do you move the mountain or do you move the road? Which is easier, right? Sometimes they do move the mountain, but most of the time you move the road around the mountain. Why would you be tearing down mountains because you want straight roads? It doesn't work that way. Well, it could work that way, but there's a lot more effort. So the conversation can be very nuanced in terms of, do we use bridges, do we use tunnels, there are different ways of approaching the same problem. And recognizing that there are advantages and disadvantages to any approach to any problem. In terms of universal health, we're going to really disagree on how we approach that problem, because you don't want to incentivize abusing the system, meaning getting too many tests, and using more resources than are necessary to give you a good quality of life. So there's the resource, healthcare, and then there's your quality of life. We want to maximize both. We don't want to use too much resources to give you the maximum amount of quality of life. And the price tag for that is what? First we need to establish what the price tag can be and what the price tag actually is. So anytime you want to influence behavior by suggesting an action, what are the consequences of that action? And that's really where I see where we're going, is learning how to get beyond the emotional aspects of what somebody says and looks at what is the actual action of what somebody says. Desensitizing people to emotional language, I think, is important. And that would be my argument to any SJW about gender pronouns and stuff like that. Are you sensitizing them or desensitizing them to name calling? If you're sensitizing them to name calling, you're going to make them more vulnerable. And the argument often on this is sort of a biological model. One advantage of eating dirt for kids is that it helps challenge their immune system. If you don't challenge your immune system at some level, you will become more susceptible to diseases. Look at the bubble boy who couldn't develop an immune system, so he was stuck in a bubble, which only made his immune system even less until he probably didn't have any at all. But we know how the immune system reacts to its environment, so wouldn't you want to challenge the immune system in a controlled way, like a college campus, for instance? So wouldn't that be a place where you do constructive challenging of the intellectual immune system? And people learn how to deal with controversial ideas like the flat earth. The idea that we can't talk about flat earth is really silly. That's a good educational tool for talking about what would be just a subject. How do you handle the subject? What facts do you have, etc.? So to extend on the idea of the immune response, how does a vaccine work? By challenging the immune system at a very mild level, and thus you have antibodies to work to reject an incoming virus that you may have never seen before. Smallpox being an example. So you give a weak form of the smallpox, and that challenges the immune system so that if a strong form of the smallpox comes in, you can deal with it. This would be the model that I would encourage all feminists, all SJWs to really seriously think about. Which model are you working on? Are you trying to inoculate people against polio? Are you trying to isolate them from ever getting polio? That's really unlikely that you're going to be able to isolate people from the virus, right? So it's better that they have an immune system that can fight the virus. So one reason you see people are so extreme is they don't have strong intellectual immune systems. We haven't been working to develop people's intellectual immune systems in colleges. So you do have some pretty wild ideas. Well, we need to prevent people from hearing those wild ideas. And this is just not constructive because you're weakening their immune system. So censorship, and this is why censorship is so damaging to people's intellectual immune systems. They need their ideas to be challenged. Everyone needs their ideas to be challenged. Even good ideas need to be challenged so that you understand why they're good ideas. the best way to challenge a good idea is with a bad idea, because then you can show why the good idea is superior to that bad idea. And sometimes you just need to try. You know, they said that you couldn't land rockets. Well, let's try. And they were successful. And they have landed the second rocket that's been reused. So, challenging assumptions is important. And it's important on many different levels. And it is about your own personal immune system. And it's okay to be wrong. It's really important. So, I've challenged Thunderfoot on the Hyperloop. I understand what he's saying, but I still think it's doable. So, I don't mind if I'm wrong. I could be wrong. But it's okay to be wrong. And if you're not being wrong, you're not trying hard enough. If you don't make mistakes, then you're not giving it your all. Because when you're at the edge of a mistake, then you're at your maximum level. In tennis, you get 2 serves. So don't do a weak serve on your first serve. Go for it on your first serve, and then put in your third-rate serve so you get the ball in play. But how would you radically change the game if you didn't allow for 2 serves? And it's been suggested. It's an interesting idea, but would be a different game. It certainly would be less of a service game and more of a defender's game. Anyways, that's just an example of a environment. By changing the rules, you can change the behavior of people, and that's something that we need to be concerned about. Rules will create the strategies, but the strategies are emergent properties of the rules. So, yes, rules are important, but realize strategies will emerge. So this is what we're seeing right now, is the survival of the news media trying to survive in this current climate. Will they be successful? I don't think so. I think they're going to have to adapt or die. You know, it's crunch time for old media. And I think the executives and the overhead of some of these news agencies are dangerous. You know, they have so much overhead. And you can't have that much executive overhead, editors and managers, the big picture guys, in instances where the individuals, the people that are producing the content, need to be more accountable for what they're producing individually. So I think we will see a model where we'll see individual news channels, news producers, news type of people that will be personally accountable. It won't be the Wall Street Journal. It will be Philip DiFranco, or maybe another personality that Philip DiFranco hires, but will hire under the understanding that I hired you because you represent yourself, but who you are also is representative of what the message I want to put out. But there will still be more of an accountability on the individual than on the organization. Now, if Philip moves away from that model and tries to go to the Wall Street Journal, everything this magazine is editorialized, there's editorial control rather, then I think there will be, it will be interesting to see how he deals with that problem. And I'm not sure how it will ultimately work out. But it is interesting to observe this transition of new media. And as new media gets funding, you know, in terms of how they get funding, kind of an NPR model, but cheaper. You know, it's like, can we do the news, but apply the news to the most important resources? And I mean, Philip DiFranco has demonstrated that he is really committed to the research arm to make sure he gets his facts right. And that's commendable, because that is something that we want to go to a source that we can actually say, is this factually correct? And even if we're questioning it, we'll say, well, this is what I'm questioning about this. I'm a little leery of this particular fact. Putting that into the news, and us as consumers going, yeah, okay, we need to be cautious about that. We can't assume that to be true. So I mean, being cautious is really important, and knowing where a source is coming from is also important. That's the nice thing about when you go to a live event or you go and you take pictures. Now you can say what somebody said factually. There's no that's not ambiguous, but what they meant by what they said could be. And if we don't take it in context of who they are as a person, we could really distort what somebody says. So you're not free from that analyst, but at least you can say factually that's what they said. Now, I think in a matter of fairness, we need to come back to people and say, is that what you meant? Because you know what this could mean is that you want to kill all white people. You know, is that really what you mean by Black Lives Matter? You know, so you want to clarify with people in terms of your interpretation. And if they don't want clarification, they just simply, I don't talk to you, I censor you, I don't listen to you, then you have to base your opinions solely on the information they've provided for you, which is why not having a conversation with someone is so incredibly bad idea, I would say. But, you know, if you want to live in an echo chamber, go for it. So it's almost an hour. I don't know why I did this, but I wasn't doing videos and I wanted to put something out. I've been thinking a lot about Evergreen, been thinking a lot about this idea of racism that really bothers me quite a lot. And my next video I'm hoping will be about this idea of the white supremacist culture. And that's kind of what I'm working on. In my back of the head, I've done some stuff on that, but expect more on that. But this is just kind of talking about VidCon and the craziness that's gone there. And I decided I was going to pick on Philip DiFranco. He can criticize me for it, but that's fine. I seriously doubt it, because it's only good news for me, right? Okay. Anyways, thanks for watching, and comment if you have any questions.